Pedro found a strange bone on the beach, and nothing about it made sense. He took it to the museum to find the truth, but what he discovered changed everything. Stay with us, because you don't want to miss what happens next. And if you enjoy stories like this, feel free to subscribe. Let's begin. Pedro enters the museum looking for answers. Pedro found a strange bone on the beach, and now he was standing in front of the museum looking for answers. As he stepped inside, the temperature changed. Cool air, soft light, and walls covered in ancient stories. Pedro looked around slowly, taking it all in. This place feels different, he thought. Every corner seemed to hold something important. Old statues, faded paintings, and objects from a world long gone. His footsteps echoed gently on the floor, as if the building itself was listening. Pedro wasn't just visiting a museum, he was entering a place where time felt frozen. And then he remembered why he was here. The mysterious bone he found on the beach. That thought changed everything. He held the bone carefully in his mind as he moved deeper inside. Something inside this museum might finally explain it. Something feels strange inside the museum. Pedro continued walking through the museum halls, each room revealing something new. Ancient objects were everywhere. Tools, sculptures, broken artifacts, pieces of forgotten lives. He stopped in front of a glass case. Inside, something ancient rested silently. Pedro leaned closer, studying every detail. Everything here has a story, he thought. The museum felt alive in its own quiet way, like it was waiting to be understood. He moved from one exhibit to another, slowly, carefully, observing everything, symbols on the walls, strange materials, older structures from lost civilizations. But his mind kept returning to one thing, the bone he found on the beach. It didn't feel random anymore. It felt connected to something much bigger. Pedro took a deep breath and kept walking deeper into the mystery. The explorer sees the bone and freezes. Pedro saw someone in the distance, an older man wearing a hat and a vest with many pockets. The man was the head explorer of the museum. He was looking at an old map, his face full of focus. Pedro walked toward him, feeling a bit nervous. "Excuse me," Pedro said softly. The explorer looked up, his eyes sharp and curious behind his glasses. Pedro didn't say a word. He simply reached into his bag. He pulled out the mysterious bone he found on the beach and held it out under the museum lights. The explorer's eyes widened immediately. He adjusted his glasses, leaning in closer to see the texture. Silence filled the space between them for a long moment. The explorer touched the surface of the bone, very gently. "Where did you find this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Pedro explained the beach, the sand, and the mystery. The explorer looked around the museum halls. "We need to compare this," he said firmly. "Follow me. I think I know where to start looking for answers." It doesn't match an elephant. They arrived at a massive hall filled with large skeletons. The explorers stopped in front of a giant African elephant. It was tall, heavy, and very impressive. "Let's look at the size," the explorer suggested. Pedro held his bone next to the elephant's leg bone. They both looked closely, comparing the shape and the texture. The elephant's bone was thick and rough, built for heavy weight. But Pedro's bone was different. It felt lighter, yet stronger. The curves didn't match. The way it connected was not the same. No, the explorer said, shaking his head slowly. An elephant is a magnificent creature, but this is not it. Pedro looked at the massive skeleton above him. He felt small in such a big world of history. If it wasn't an elephant, what could it be? The mystery was still there, hidden in his hands. The explorer turned toward the next exhibit. "Don't worry, Pedro," he said with a small smile. "The museum is big, and we have many more things to check." Not a rhinoceros either. The next stop was the rhinoceros exhibit. The skeleton was shorter than the elephant, but very wide. It looked like a tank made of ancient bone. Pedro studied the thick ribs and the heavy skull. He placed his bone near the rhinoceros's shoulder. The explorer used a small flashlight to see the details. "Look at the density," the man whispered. They compared the way the bone aged over time. The rhinoceros bone had a specific pattern, deep and solid. But Pedro's bone had a smoother surface, almost elegant. It didn't have the same marks of a heavy land animal. Another miss, the explorer noted. He wrote something down in a small notebook. Pedro felt a bit disappointed, but he didn't want to stop. Each comparison was teaching him something new about his find. He was learning that his bone was special, unique. It didn't belong to the animals he knew from the world today. The museum air felt cooler as they walked deeper. "We are looking for something different," the explorer said. "Something that, perhaps, doesn't walk on the ground like we do. It's not from the ocean." They entered a room that felt as vast as the ocean itself. Hanging from the ceiling was a spectacular sight: a blue whale skeleton stretching across the entire hall. Maybe it's from the sea, Pedro thought out loud. After all, he had found the bone near the water. The explorer climbed a small ladder to get a better view. Pedro handed him the mystery bone. They compared it to the massive fins and the long spine. The whale's bones were porous, designed to float in deep water. But the bone from the beach was solid and very hard. The shape was completely different. Not made for swimming. "It's not a whale," the explorer said, coming down the ladder. He looked at the bone with even more respect now. "This bone is not from the land and is not from the sea." Pedro felt a shiver run down his spine. If it wasn't a modern animal, what was left? The explorer pointed toward a dark archway at the end. "There is only one place left to go," he said seriously. "The ancient world, where the giants of the past remain. Older than the Ice Age. Fourth comparison, mammoth skeleton." Behind the heavy doors, they found the world of the Ice Age. A woolly mammoth stood there with massive, curved tusks. Pedro felt the history of the cold world in every bone. He compared his find to the mammoth's heavy back legs. The size was similar, but the structure was wrong. The mammoth bone was from a mammal, but this was different. "This mammoth lived thousands of years ago," the explorer said. "But your bone It is millions of years older than this. Pedro stared at the mammoth and tried to imagine the time. Millions of years? It was almost impossible to understand. The museum air felt older and heavier in this special section. The explorer looked at Pedro with a strange smile. We are leaving the world of mammals behind, Pedro. We are going into the era of the true kings of the earth. Pedro gripped his backpack straps, his heart beating fast. They were moving toward the most famous part of the museum. They entered the world of dinosaurs. They entered the Hall of Dinosaurs, a place of shadows and giants. The lighting was low, making the skeletons look like ghosts. Pedro saw long necks reaching for the ceiling and sharp claws. Every bone in this room was a fossil, turned into hard stone. "This is it," the explorer whispered, his voice full of respect. Pedro looked at his bone and then at the fossils on the floor. The color was exactly the same, a deep, earthy brown. The weight felt the same, heavy like a rock from the ground. He realized he wasn't just holding a bone. He was holding time. The silence in the room was deep, like a secret waiting to be told. They walked past the Triceratops and the Stegosaurus, searching for the one skeleton that matched the mysterious shape. "Look at the structure of the tail bones," the explorer noted. They were getting very close to the center of the room. Something very big was waiting for them in the shadows. A perfect match, T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton. There it was, the king of the tyrant lizards. The T-Rex skeleton was massive, its mouth open in a roar. Pedro felt a small, but he also felt a strange connection. The explorer pointed to a specific part of the T-Rex's long tail. "Put it there, Pedro, right next to that section." Pedro moved closer, his hands shaking just a little bit. He held the bone against the fossilized tail of the predator. It was a perfect match. The curves, the holes, the size, every detail clicked into place like a puzzle piece. "You found it," the explorer cried out. "It's a T-Rex tailbone." Pedro couldn't believe it. A piece of the most famous dinosaur. He thought about the beach and the day he found the bone. He hadn't just found a random object, he found a legend. The mystery was finally over. The answer was standing before him. The king of the dinosaurs had left a gift for him to find. The truth about the bone. The adventure was complete, and the truth was finally clear. Pedro and the explorer placed the bone in a beautiful glass case. They put a small sign in front that said, "Discovered by Pedro." "You did a great job," the explorer said, shaking Pedro's hand. "You followed the clues, you compared the facts, and you won." Pedro looked at the T-Rex one last time before leaving. He realized that history is not just in books. It is everywhere. It's under the sand, in the water, and inside our own minds. As he walked out of the museum, the sun was setting. He felt proud of what he had discovered and what he had learned. The bone was back where it belonged, in the house of history. But the memories of the search would stay with him forever. Because once you become an explorer, you never stop looking. The world is full of mysteries, and Pedro was ready for the next one. He smiled, looked at the sky, and started his long walk home. And that's the end of today's adventure. If you want to keep improving your English while following Pedro's journey, don't forget to subscribe and join our community. Every story is a new chance to learn. See you in the next one.